What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II, and I'm here joined with Cody Almasi, my co-host. Cody, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Just happy to be back. Another edition of the Gin College Podcast and talk sports with you.
Yeah, we're back better than ever, and, well, I can't speak for all of us, but not feeling too great this week.
On the side of me here, told fucking little bitch.
Look at that. Was that a cat?
Yeah, my cat trying to hop up my back. She wants to be a part of the show, apparently.
Look at that cat, a crazy cat trying to get involved in the college sports atmosphere, the college sports talk. I love it. But talking about this past weekend, some heartbreak, especially for Sparty fans like myself, have to deal with a little bit of that heartbreak. We have similar feelings as you and a lot of Michigan fans had the weekend prior to losing to us, obviously, and those somber feelings, those somber thoughts start trickling in once things like that happen. You see it. Even, we had a little bit more time to see it going into this game, going into the latter half of the game, just because we've seen how things were happening. We saw the offense not clicking. We've seen, different things were not going right. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. First off, I want to talk about is our college football playoff rankings. They have changed significantly. We talked about this last Friday on our podcast and even last Monday about how these rankings, these college football playoff rankings, are fluid. They're very easily, changeable. They can move, they can shift, they can do different things. If any team loses, if any team, falters, and they're in the top 6 position, that opens the door for people that are in the 7th, 8th, 9th positions. So let's talk about the college football playoff rankings, the Gin Pros playoff rankings. Tell me about your top 6, then I'll go through mine.
Yeah, like you said, anything can happen. These are going to change. Already, Spartans were ranked number 3. They're out of there now. So when the rankings by the committee are released tomorrow night, definitely going to see some volatility, some fluctuation. So, like, Alabama struggled. If Ed Ogeron could have coached a little bit better, and he could have put the Tigers definitely in the position to go to overtime, maybe even play for the win. But that's Alabama gets away with one. Oregon struggled a little bit. Cincinnati didn't look great. They had to stop, what was it, a goal line fumble by Tulsa is the only reason the Bearcats got out of there, I believe. But, yeah, so what I think is going to happen in the college football playoff rankings tomorrow is going to be Georgia Bulldogs at 1. A little bit of a slow start, but ended up beating the brakes off of the team they played. OU, they had a bye. Is that what happened? They had their.
I think they did. That was their bye week. A little bit late in the year, but that was their bye week.
A good time to get it. They were sitting back all the way at 8 in those initial college football playoff rankings, and with all these teams struggling, I think that they're going to slide up in there. Maybe not all the way to 2, but I think that's the spot they deserve. Cincinnati, just because they're undefeated, and like these other teams like Bama struggling, they get my nod at number 3 because they're undefeated and for what they've done over the last couple of years. Me and John talked about that before the show. You got to give them that 3 spot, at least give them the opportunity to lose it if they do slip up. Give another team the chance to beat them. Alabama, although they did struggle against LSU, we know those kind of games happen. And they got away with one. Bryce Young, he had a couple big plays, couple scrambles to lead the Crimson Tide to being able to secure the victory and get out of there with the W and not suffer another loss. Sitting on the outside looking in, even though the Buckeyes struggled, I still think that they're a team to beat, especially in the Big Ten East. No conference losses. And then Oregon, even though Oregon beat the Buckeyes, I think that the Buckeyes, if they matched up again, the Buckeyes might have their way with the Ducks, especially not at this point in the season.
Yeah, there's some important different aspects to look at. The college football playoff, the selection committee, they have to focus on, they have to look at these different things, and they have to see where different teams fit amidst different matchups. Some of these teams have already played each other. So that's something that has to be considered from the committee. That is, way above my pay grade. But we still got to look at these different, these teams that are still in front of us, the ones that still stand. Obviously, MSU gets knocked out of the top 6. The whole conversation's kind of, shifted away from the Sparties. And that's just how it has to be. Losing to Purdue, unacceptable. But we can't say we didn't see it coming. Okay, especially, I don't want to credit and cite Desmond Howard, but I actually saw this coming myself. I just stayed silent about it. I didn't want to throw any jinxes out there. Turns out it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But there's a lot of things to consider, and strength of schedule only goes so far once you get this late in the season. You got to look at wins. You got to look at the last 2 seasons, especially for Cincinnati, losing only 1 game the last 2 seasons. That's something that has to be looked at as far as their resume, their strength of resume has to be looked at, has to be considered. So going through my top 6, our top 3 are very similar, actually identical. UGA had no problem this weekend against Missouri, 43-6, got them the win. OU obviously had the bye week late in the season, but they kind of sat back. They're probably sitting back watching, maybe have a couple beers, watching this game, and they were kind of sitting back, with their popcorn and their Bud Light in hand, because they were seeing these teams lose. They were seeing, Michigan State obviously get kicked out of the top 4, and they were feeling good doing that. They think that they have a good position, a good spot, a good chance to get in that top 6 now. Then obviously Cincy, Luke Fickell, doing a great job, had a close game against Tulsa, had no problem later in the game, though, won that one easily. And then I like Michigan at number 4. This is a very hot take, especially, everyone knows how I feel about Michigan, the Wolverines. But, all my subjective thoughts aside, I think Michigan deserves to be in that 4th spot. That close game against Michigan, or Michigan State, a very tough loss. Don't get me wrong, very tough loss to withstand. But you got to think about how close of a game that was, how strong they've been in their offense and their defense the entire year. Obviously, switching the 2 quarterbacks, J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara, a little bit of a controversy there. Is that model something that they're going to carry on and go forward with? That's something that is yet to be determined. We'll see what happens there. But no problems this weekend. Got the dub easily. And then you got to put Bama up in top right at number 5. Even with that loss against A&M, you got to look at Bama and be like, okay, they're going to be looking at Bama. If they don't put them at top 4, this is my pick. It's semi-subjective, semi-objective, to the point where I think Bama's going to stay in the top 4. Obviously, they will. They're already there. They're not going to move. But I think they deserve to be in the 5th spot. Just because they're Bama, they should be clean slate up to this point. Nick Saban knows that. A lot of people will agree with me on that. Then you got OSU, obviously that one loss against Oregon. That's where the controversy comes in, putting Oregon ahead of OSU just because they beat them. That's where it stands within the AP polls, and for good reason. So maybe Oregon deserves that 6th spot instead of OSU, but they struggled a little bit against Washington. And you had a couple rivalry games this weekend. You talk about LSU and Bama, then you got Washington and Oregon, the border rivalry, which there was some questionable moments in there for Oregon and the Ducks where they didn't look so good, didn't look so hot. So I like Oregon out of the top 6 personally. That's why, this is my top 6. Everyone has their own top 6 if they want to make it. And then there's going to be the actual top 6 that comes out this coming week. So we got to look at that, got to focus on it, and just kind of got to roll with the punches, because there's a lot of teams. There's going to be a lot more movement going forward. And we've already seen some movement, especially Michigan State losing to Purdue throws a big wrench in the entire grand scheme of the machine. So we can see that happening a lot more. There's a lot more games left. I might say there's only a couple more games left, but there's, the most important part of the season is ahead of us. So you got to focus on that, focus on the upcoming games, and you got to play for position, not only in your conference, but amongst the college football playoff as well. So a lot of games that can still really turn the tide. So I'm excited.
Yep. Some of the biggest games and most impactful games are definitely in front of us. And if we back up a little outside of the top 4, top 6, even in the top 10, there was some fluctuation. That's the game we're going to cover first. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons coming in hot to this game, to UNC, and the Tar Heels hand them their first loss in an absolute shootout. 113 total points scored. Aiden O'Connell, not Aiden O'Connell, Sam Hartman, he had 395 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's a Wake Forest quarterback. Ty Chandler for the Tar Heels had 214 yards, and 4 touchdowns. as they come back from down 18. And, we talked about Sam Hartman being the other Sam that your girlfriend tells you not to worry about. And he had to sit back on the sidelines and watch as his defense, which we talked about both of these teams' defense on Friday and how their liabilities. And, yeah, we called that one to a T. Just absolute heartbreaker for him to watch his team suffer their first loss as the Tar Heels come back and beat them by 3 points.
Yeah, an impressive performance by the Tar Heels. They didn't let up on the Demon Deacons. They found the holes in their defense. They really found a way to score points. But Wake Forest fought back. They didn't give up. Sam Hartman, obviously, a true athlete for Wake Forest, really setting the standard in the quarterback position. Like you said, 398 yards, 5 touchdowns. Those 2 interceptions don't really help him out, don't help out his resume much. But you got to look at, the percentage of completions too, right there around 50%, 25 for 51. Just not good enough. That reminds me of Patty Mahomes going against the Giants last week. It's just not good enough. And it turned out to be the deciding factor this weekend to make it the point where they are just falling short barely. You're playing with fire when you have that, low of a percentage completion rate. And you want to be anywhere from the 65 to 75 percentile when you're talking about talking about completions, talking about balls being caught by your receiver. You want to have the ball in the hand. You want to make sure it gets to its location, and you want to make sure you're strong and effective through the air. And that's going to set the standard and make the difference, especially in these throw up, toss up games. And Tar Heels tuned out to be the common denominator as far as being the better team. And
yeah, oddly enough,
that.
Even though these are both ACC teams, this was a non-conference matchup because back in, I think it was 2015, they made some sort of agreement that they didn't play each other often enough. So they agreed to 2 games. This is the second one, and that don't count again as a conference loss. So Wake Forest is still undefeated in the ACC, oddly enough, after playing UNC and taking their first loss overall. But yeah, going to have to do your own research on it and why exactly, but it's not an ACC game because of some agreement that these 2 teams formed a while back.
That's very interesting. That's something that's worth a Google search. And, to have that not count against them really puts, Demon Deacons in a solid position still. Even if you see this on ESPN, you're looking at the Gamecast, looking at the page for this game, it says the Demon Deacons are still 5-0 in conference play. So it has to stand true. And that still leaves them in a good position to win out in the ACC and to win the ACC essentially and leave them in a good position to gain at least a good bowl game. Might, take away their chances of having any potential to make it to the college football playoff, the top 4 or even the top 6. But, definitely a good bowl game is in their future, I think.
Yeah, both these teams have games left to be played, though. Wake Forest got to go to NC State and Clemson. And then UNC, they got to play 7-2, number 25 Pitt, and then they end the season at NC State as well. So lots left to be decided over there in the ACC.
Definitely a lot to be decided. We'll be looking at it very closely going down the stretch here. Let's move on. Let's talk about MSU and Purdue. Obviously a heartbreaker game, hard for me to even talk about, hard for me to watch. It was put a little bit of a damper on my Saturday, as I'm sure it did a lot of people. Michigan fans, the arrogant Michigan fans, they were up in arms. They were up in arms on Saturday. They were very happy to see Purdue win that game, especially, with the events that had transpired the weekend before that. And it really throws a wrench in the Big Ten picture too, especially in the Big Ten East with, OSU, Michigan State, and Michigan still at the top. There's still a lot that can happen going forward. I guess, what did you see in this game that transpired and that happened to really work against Michigan State as far as them being a contender in this game?
Before I address the actual analysis of the game, definitely my Michigan compadres. I seen them chirping. I seen it in the air. They were live tweeting the game, which just not a huge fan of myself, especially if it's MSU or Michigan. But before our team even plays, before we know what's going to happen to us in Indiana, and we're already just celebrating an MSU win, don't really condone that too much personally. And there's the same people who are doing that who are complaining about our win in Indiana. Who they had seven points, didn't score in the second half. A bunch of players got hurt, So it is what it is. That's the Michigan fan base. That's what we're known for. But yeah, we're celebrating that win. I see a little too much. We got lots left to be decided, and I just want to take care of business and win out. As far as this game goes, though, I thought the Spartans were going to take care of business. I called out Desmond Howard. Didn't think that, and Paul Feinbaum. They put the Sparties on upset alert, and they rang true. The Boilermakers were fired up in West Lafayette, and Aiden O'Connell and David Bell. They were the same duo who really got together to upset the Iowa Hawkeyes, the number 2 ranked team in the nation. So I guess I thought they would account for that, but I guess it's really hard to account for players like that who can just be an X factor.
Yeah, they proved to be the X factor as far as the duo was concerned. David Bell going crazy on the offensive side of the ball, really finding the holes, finding the vulnerabilities in the Michigan State defense, and they got the job done. They had to get it done, and they really didn't have anything to lose with 3 losses going into this game, and they played that way. And they perform and they do well against top-ranked teams, especially this year. You mentioned Iowa, you mentioned obviously Michigan State. These games are winnable for the Purdue Boilermakers. They're still a solid team. Yes, they have some vulnerabilities. Yes, they've lost some questionable games, but they have the potential to win the big games. That's why there's no such thing as a BS game. People are, a lot of Michigan State fans are walking into this game. Oh, no problem. Purdue, oh, no big deal. I was walking into this game. I was worried. I wasn't scared. I was worried. I was concerned. And I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to jinx anybody. Obviously, Paul Finnenbaum and Desmond Howard did that for me. And they were right. And they had good reason to put them on upset alert, the Spoilermakers, it's been coined. And it's just one of those things where you got to be focused on it. There's different teams like this in the Big Ten that I put on upset alert for with the potential to be any team. That being Northwestern in past years, obviously Iowa, Penn State, Purdue, these different, even Nebraska this year, they've been, teams that play with nothing to lose. And yeah, even Illinois is kind of a sleeper pick. Even Rutgers has been one in past years, not really as consistently as the other teams mentioned, but these teams can win games. They have the potential. They can put it together when they want to. And they got the job done. I got to give Purdue and the Boilermakers credit for winning that game with putting everything on the table. And they got the job done. They, like you said, how many carries did Kenneth Walker get in the second half?
Only 5 carries in the second half. Absolutely criminal to limit your best player like that and the Heisman frontrunner. It's hard to wrap your head around, especially when they fed him and they showed that glimpse, that really quick drive towards the end when they brought it within 8. They got the 2-point conversion, and it looked eerily similar to the comeback that they mounted against my Wolverines the week prior. And I was texting you. I thought that they were going to get that. Then the Boilermakers came out. They got a screen, big play, and then a 3rd down conversion, which really just took the life out of any hopes that the Sparties had.
Yeah, that was their last-ditch effort. Yeah, I remember you texted me, and they put themselves in a bad position early in the game where they got down 7-21. They wound up coming back in the second half and tying that game up. And already at that point, I was seeing my uncertainties. I was seeing the uncertainties in the offense. Peyton Thorne, obviously had a big rushing touchdown. That was big to see. So I'm like, maybe they got it. But, up until this point, I really haven't saw much fire out of these guys. Then they pulled away another 2 touchdowns. They went up, got, the 2-point conversion after that next touchdown. But it was too little too late at that point. Already too much damage has been done on the defensive end for Michigan State. So it was just too hard to fight back from. And it was tough to watch, but it was kind of something that you could see it written in the stars before it happened. And it's hard to say that as a State fan, but you got to be a realist. You got to be objective. You got to look at things how they are, and you got to focus on the next game. We got Maryland up next. So a lot to focus on.
Too. Aiden O'Connell, though, one more time. 536 yards, 3 touchdowns, 40 completions. That's 500 yards is pretty incredible, even in the NFL. So that deserves a tipping of the cap.
It does. I've
seen a lot of also some calls. Were you locked in? Were there questionable calls officiating in this game? I've seen a lot of Spartan fans complaining about officiating.
There were some questionable calls, but, at a certain point, especially, with the calls that we were granted, and I don't want to say we got lucky in the Michigan game. I know the Michigan fans were up in arms because they wanted them to go either way. Maybe they were 50-50 calls. I thought they were called, correctly. So I really can't complain about the refs in this game. They did their job. They made good calls. Obviously holding calls, PTI calls, they're gonna be questionable depending on what side they benefit. So they're gonna be 50-50 calls. A lot of discretion comes into play for the refs to make the decision on the spot. So I really can't blame the refs. I got to blame the Spartans in this game for losing it. They lost it, not the refs.
Yeah, I agree. And I said it about my Wolverines. I don't like to use moments like that, especially when it's not like there's other reasons the team could have won. It's not like the Lions a couple times where they lost in a 10-second runoff. That's a little bit different. But in games like this, I think the officiating and complaining about it, that's part of the game, and it happens in almost every game. There's calls to be complained about. It should just be left unsaid.
Definitely, for the most part, unless it's a blatant missed call by the referees, it's best to just leave it alone. You got to incorporate that human element. That's what makes football great, is having that human element. And now we got the review process, which can make it a little bit more questionable. You can call it a little bit more automated. Having people looking at and put especially targeting calls and out of bounds, things like that. I do like the reviewing process to a certain extent, and I've talked about this in Gin and Tonics and in podcasts before. I'm not going to get into it right now, but you got to have that human element, and that's what makes the game so important and so fun to watch, is having that human element to, essentially impact the game one way or the other. Not fully. You don't want to see it fully impact the game like we've seen it happen to the Lions multiple times. You're talking about the Aaron Rodgers face mask on Ziggy Ansah, multiple. I don't want to get into that either. Trust me. But you got to have that human element, and makes the game better. And, to have that, if you get rid of that, it really takes away a big part of the experience for not only the players, but also the fans.
Definitely.
So good deal. Let's move on. Let's talk about Texas A&M and the Auburn Tigers. What did you say? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you wanted to look kind of at the Big Ten West and whoever comes out of the Big Ten East is going to be matching up with, because it's pretty tight between Wisconsin, Minnesota, Purdue, and Iowa over there.
Yeah, let's take a look at it real quick. Let's take a look. So I'm going to actually try to bring it up on the screen here if I can do that. And we can just kind of take a quick gander at what we're looking at for the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West.
The Badgers have won 5 straight, and now they're sitting on top of the Big Ten West. And Michigan's win over them looks a little more like a quality win than it did definitely at the time.
Yeah, definitely does. And it's a close race. You can say it's a close race, especially between Ohio State, Michigan. In the Big Ten East, the Big Ten West is still up for grabs. A lot of teams at 4-2. So that's something we got to consider too and got to look at. So I guess, who do you have going forward with the rest of the games in front of us? Who do you have winning the Big Ten West?
It's hard to pick against Wisconsin right now after what they've done over the last 5 games. They just destroyed, absolutely dominated, dismantled the Rutgers Scarlet Knights over the weekend. I think it was 50-something to 3. Before this week, Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, were looking like the apparent team to come out. They got ranked in the college football playoff rankings, I think number 20, and they came out and laid an egg against Illinois. And that's a real head scratcher, but just kind of speaks to the chaos of the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, a lot of chaos, a lot of upsets, a lot of, heartbreak in certain areas. Obviously, some triumph, especially in Illinois' corner. And, there's a lot to be said about this Illinois team. You might call it too little, too late. Probably is. But to see this fire late in the season with this Illinois team, it's impressive, to say the least. They're still making something out of their season. They're not throwing in the towel completely. Winning some big games against Minnesota, Penn State. Those are big games to put on your resume to take with you into the postseason, into the off season, and essentially into the next season. So a lot to be happy about if you're the Illinois Fighting Illini.
The Cornhuskers just signed on Scott Frost for another year. Just some random news, but
did they?
And there's some down there at the basement of the Big Ten West. But
they should be higher than that. Based on how they've played, they should be higher than that. They've had some tough breaks, lost some, 50-50 games, but I like where Nebraska's at. I think that they should hold their heads up high, keep their chins up, And there's a lot of potential for that Nebraska team too. The Big Ten strong all around, really. I mean, any team has potential to come out and play good football any day of the week. So that has to be considered. Obviously, some lower tiered teams like Indiana, Rutgers, and Maryland. I think those games or those teams are mostly sprinkled within the Big Ten East. And the Big Ten West is definitely much more, evenly spread out as far as skill, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just kind of how geographic, representation has basically put these teams in different areas, whether it's the Big Ten East or the Big Ten West, based on the geographic location of these teams and these schools. So that has to be considered too. And I think that it's good how it's set up because you got the Big Ten East where it is weighted on one side, but there's good teams in the Big Ten East, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State. And then you got those other teams sprinkled in there where they have the potential to win against any of those teams pretty much any game, any day of the week as well. So, you see Rutgers beating Michigan State last year. Maryland obviously can come out with some fire. Indiana hasn't really found it this year, 0-6 in conference play. So, but it's just kind of just to roll the dice, really. Roll the dice. Who's going to come out and play? Who's going to come out and get the job done week after week?
Especially this season, anybody can beat anybody.
Very true. Very true. And we've seen that. It's been very apparent up until this point this year. There's very few teams that remain on the undefeated list. And we'll see how it pans out. It'll be really interesting going down the stretch here with these, last few conference games and a lot of conferences that are 50-50 and then going into the championships and, different things of that nature to essentially place and propel different teams that you might not have expected in the top 10. You might see them get propelled into the top 10 going down the stretch down to Selection Sunday. So a lot can happen between now and then. And there's still going to be a lot of games that can be deciding factors. They can work as deciding factors going into the college football playoffs. So
starting with Penn State and Michigan this weekend, going to be a big one.
That is a big one. I would say we got to, maybe pump the brakes a little bit, reconvene about Maryland for the Sparties. But as we've seen against Purdue, you can't really let up against any team. We got complacent. We got comfortable. We we just beat Michigan. Oh, we just got to do what we did against Michigan. But they didn't do what they did against Michigan. And I'm not going to bring that game up too much more. I'm just going to say this one thing. Having that fire, having that tenacity on offense was absent on Saturday against Purdue. And that's why they lost. I think it's a big component why they lost. Let's move on a little bit, though. Let's talk about Auburn and Texas A&M. The Aggies obviously shut down Auburn and the Tigers and Bo Nix and got the job done. Held them to a field goal. And very impressive performance with the Aggies. Really saw that top 5 defense in the country. What do we see that game that really confirmed a lot of our preconceived notions? And what do we see that surprised us?
Just the absence of offense at all in this game was a little surprising to me. No touchdown scored by either of the offensive. The only touchdown came late in the game, and it was a scoop and score, 24-yard defensive touchdown. So, but I like how you said that. It speaks to their top 5 defense. That was showcased a little bit early on in the season. We talked about it a few times in the first couple of shows, and they've showed that they took a couple punches and they've been able to rebalance and gain some sort of identity. And they're really sitting in a good position at 7-2. That win against Alabama is going to go a long way. And the people on the committee and the people who make the rankings in their mind, because we all know how they feel about Alabama. So that win will go a long way in just proving that they're capable of going into any teams and shutting them down like they did against Auburn. They'll have another chance to prove it next week when they play the Rebels in Oxford, Mississippi, Ole Miss, and that explosive offense. We know what that can do. Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral, a Heisman candidate. So it'll be interesting. The Aggies are not out of the football playoffs, but definitely not out of the SEC conversation, especially if Alabama plays how they played against LSU. They could be susceptible to taking another loss.
Yeah, if Alabama loses, that puts – you got to put Texas A&M at first place in the SEC West. You have to. It'd be a criminal to not do that. So I guess who's Alabama got up next?
Let's take a look here.
Yeah, let's take a quick look. I'm going to look at myself just because this is very interesting. Things are getting interesting in the SEC, obviously the strongest conference, arguably in college football today. with a lot of conferences closely behind them.
It's really who gets to play Georgia. They're just fighting for who gets to play Georgia because the Bulldogs have pretty much locked down the SEC East over there. Wow, Alabama has New Mexico State this weekend, so that's their signature little kind of cupcake game coming in week 10, their 10th game of the season. They always play almost an FCS team. I know New Mexico State, they got a little bit more credentials than an FCS team, but not much more. I don't even know their mascot, if I'm being honest. But then they have Arkansas, and they finish their season at Auburn before the SEC championship.
So, Auburn, they come out and play a game. They could potentially – that's the only one I really can think of that would give Alabama any bit of a troubling time. You look at the spread in the New Mexico State-Alabama game next week, minus 51.5.
Holy shit. The Aggies themselves. Wow.
To cover 51, you got to score 51.5 points.
The over-under is 67, though. Look at that. The 1-8 New Mexico State Aggies. See, that's what Alabama, they're just known for having these kind of games late in the season when other teams are playing some of their biggest games of the season.
51.5 points. That just has me sitting here, astounded. I'm flabbergasted to see that. And that's an opportunity for the bettors, whatever side you pick. I like plus 51.5. I don't care who.
I think it's going to be a showcase day for Bryce Young, Brian Robinson Jr., Jamison Williams, I should say, and then some of the defenders on the other side of the ball. I think they'll have a good day.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Not too much to say about that, but we'll see what happens. We're excited to see it, and we'll be giving you guys some insights coming up closer to the weekend this Friday. Let's talk about some college basketball. What do we got this week? What's going on Tuesday? Tuesday?
The State Farm Championships Classic. That's been a staple since 2015, I believe, and it's your Sparties, the Jayhawks, the Duke Blue Devils, and one more team. Who is it? Kentucky Wildcats. So just huge coaches, giant names as far as players, blue bloods, recruiting. Some of the best there is when it comes to it. This is Mike Krasinski's last year, Coach K. So that's something we'll be following and talking about. The Duke Blue Devils, see how they play for Coach K in his last season. A Hall of Fame coach, one of the best in college basketball history. And, yeah, we'll definitely give some shouts out to him and his legacy throughout the year as it goes along. But I'm excited to see how your Sparties play. Max Christie, big name coming in. And the Sparties aren't getting much love as far as preseason rankings. We know that doesn't matter. But I think Izzo will use that to his advantage.
I think the lower you can rank them early in the season is better for the Spartans. We've seen this happen. I talked about this. This is a big attribute, I think, to why State lost against Purdue this past week. You gas them up, you put them at, number 3, which is a pretty good ranking in the college football scheme of things. You gas them up, that goes to their head, and they kind of, falter just knowing that they're number 3. They're knowing that they're in the college football playoff, knowing they're in the conversation. So I think the lower you can rank them early in the season, the better. And I think they'll handle that better ego-wise and, thought process-wise. They'll process it a lot easier and kind of put that out of their mind and allow them to really fight to the top and prove themselves to be able to get to that point. If they do, we'll see how the Sparties do. They might deserve to be ranked lower. We'll see how they play in the State Farm Champions Classic coming up this Tuesday. Tomorrow, game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern at Madison Square Garden. So I'm excited. That's going to be a good game. I always like the Champions Classic. It's going to be awesome, just as ever. Good way to open the season up.
Definitely a chance to get some early action, heavy-hitting games that we probably won't get again for a while, like we've talked about. There's a few tournaments around Thanksgiving and whatnot. We'll get a few marquee games, matchups here and there, but this is really a sweet treat to begin the season. My Wolverines on Wednesday are hosting the Buffalo Bulls, and that should be a rout. But on our side, we're ranked number 6 after last year, having a good year. Hunter Dickinson, He declared for the draft, but he's back for another season. He's huge. Our center, big man, 7'1". Got a couple big names coming in from Juwan Howard, but being ranked number 6. Got a lot of new faces, transfers, a lot of pieces that are going to have to mesh and gel with one another as the season moves forward. So just being all the hype, like you said, I'd rather be ranked lower and work your way up than be looked at so highly early on in the season. But I don't think it'll affect them too much. I think it'll be a good year for both squads. One thing about Michigan State basketball, you guys play us like every game we played last year. If you guys played like that against other teams, like it's just that's the kind of thing. You guys were so good last year, especially when you played us and what you did to our great offense, how you guys shut us down. But then against other teams, it was gone. So if you could summon that energy for other Big Ten teams to play late on, like, I mean, usually March is your guys' year. So, you guys almost pulled off the play-in tournament win.
Yeah, we have a problem with playing to our competition, and that's something that has been a big casualty to Michigan State athletics for a long time. So if we can avoid that, just play our own game and, get the job done regardless of who we're playing, just do our assignments, then we'll be in better shape than if we don't do that and we actually play to our opponent's strengths instead of our own strengths. So if we can kind of break that bad habit, we'll be in better shape than if we don't.
I was going to try to look at the game cast of this game real quick, see what Kansas is bringing to the table, because I don't really know any big names from the Jayhawks, but they got to be ranked number 3 for a reason.
Yeah, you see these teams, usually they're all ranked pretty highly, and any of them can excel at any point in the year. And that's why they have this Champions Classic. That's why they have these 4 teams. And a lot of it has to do with the coaches, too. They're all Hall of Fame coaches. So there's a lot of reasons why these teams are here.
Who are some of the biggest names playing for the Sparties this year on the hardwood?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think who we retained from last year, because it's
you got Hogard.
You got AJ Hogard. You got crazy thing is I should know these guys because I drink beers with them when I lived in East Lansing and go and take shots with all these guys at the bars. Don't tell Coach Izzo that. But
Joey Hauser, he's a big scrapping senior coming back. I like watching him play. Steven Izzo, Julius Marble II.
Julius Marble, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, and then kind of some new faces are going to Bingham Jr., I think, or not. Yeah, he played a little bit.
He's been there. Marcus Bingham, he's been there.
So some new faces. Max Christie, I'm excited to see what that freshman guard is going to do. And, yeah, it should be an exciting season.
Yeah, it should be, and I'm excited. Gabe Brown's also coming back. Maddie Sissoko, Joey Hauser, like you said, Malik Hall. He's been here last year. He's played with the team. AJ Hogard, expected more out of him. Obviously, Max Christie coming in as a new face. He's going to be looking to take control of the offense. Tyson Walker. And, a couple other names in there that will be looking to wow me. They'll be looking to surprise Spartan fans and make a name for themselves early. The Champions Classic is a great opportunity for them to do that. They have no better opportunity than this Tuesday, tomorrow, to do that, to make that an apparent thing. So we'll see what happens. I don't want to get to the point where I'm gassing up these players, these new guys, these new recruits, even if they're 5-star recruits. Right. I want to see them play. I want to see them play against high-class teams that are ranked in the top 5 before, I really make assumptions on them. And you really can't make a very accurate assumption, even in the Champions Classic, because you got to play a couple of games to gain that chemistry before you're really a true like
Definitely.
good team, a team that has it all there. So
I'm going to be watching Imani Bates too, who he landed with the Memphis Tigers down there, Penny Hardaway. So I'm excited. He, both Michigan and Michigan State fans followed him throughout his high school career. He decommitted from Michigan State, and then it was really up in the air what he's going to do with the future. He landed at Memphis, so I'm curious to see what he's going to do too. So I'll be watching him.
Yes, we will. We both will. We're excited. College basketball is on the brink. We're here. Finally, here's the little overlap season, part of the season. It's a little bit of the college sports eclipse, I guess you can call it. And we're going to have to cover both. We're going to have to allot both of our time to football. We're wrapping up the football season here. Still got a lot of key games, got, championships as far as conference play. Then you got the college football playoff. Obviously, you're going to put a lot of effort into that. But then we're jumping right into college basketball. So it might be 75-25 as far as effort and time allotted, just because we want to finish strong with college football and then really dive deep and dive hard into college basketball once it's here. And that's the only sport to worry about. So stay with us, bear with us throughout the entire thing. Cody, you got any final statements before we sign off today?
Nope. Go blue. Enjoy the basketball that's going to take place from now until we talk to you guys next time on Friday, and keep looking forward to the graphics we're going to be putting out, me and our admin. And yeah, just keep following this thing. We're trying to get it off the ground, get it going. We're putting all our effort into it, so we appreciate everything everybody's doing on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. We're really excited to see what's going to come soon, to what's going to happen next. And we're putting our best foot forward, putting all the content out there. Cody and our admin, Andy, have been doing a great job, a hell of a job as far as putting graphics out there, putting analytic content out there. That's big time in Cody's wheelhouse, as far as putting analytic and statistical content out there for the people to know, to be invested, to be educated on what's going on around the sports world. So we're really happy for that. So yeah, stay tuned on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and all of our social media outlets. Make sure to check out our link tree at the bottom of the screen for all of our content, all of our handles, all of our socials. Everything is on there. And stay posted to our website as well for all updates regarding Gin Promotions and the Gin Sports Network. But yeah, really look forward to see you guys on the social media waves. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II, with Cody Almasi. Have a great day.